I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I am Sunil Dasgupta. This week, we turn to the consequences of utility deregulation that Maryland went through in 1999 under the then Democratic Governor Paris Glendening. Roughly 10 years later, the Maryland Public Service Commission, the state's utility governance agency, introduced new regulations called the Purchase of Receivables, which enabled even small energy trading firms to bill consumers through the local utility, essentially guaranteeing them their payments once consumers switched to them for energy purchase. This led to a range of business practices that, in effect, have cost Maryland taxpayers billions of dollars, while the presumed benefits of this arrangement appear to be non-existent. I asked Laurel Peltier, a Baltimore-based energy activist and writer, to explain what's going on. Utility law is complex in part because the market is naturally shaped to be a monopoly. But deregulation has sought to introduce the logic of a competitive market, and it is not working. I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society moving precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Valeria Stewart, an Arlington-based roots and Argentinian-tinged world music singer-songwriter, and her trio Crooked Sparrow. Kevin Dudley on guitar and mandolin, Valeria Stewart on vocals and guitar, and Jenny Smith on the violin. You can find Valeria's music in Spanish and English on her YouTube channel at Valeria Stewart Music. What is news in a week when a former president of the United States is arraigned for breaking laws he once took an oath to protect? The whole point of the podcast is to show that politics closer to homes matters. So, let's try to do that instead. The controversial I-495-270 widening project in southern Montgomery County, it seems, is likely to move forward under the new Democratic administration of Governor Wes Moore and Lieutenant Governor Aruna Miller. Recently, Lieutenant Governor Miller described the traffic on I-270, the main artery that runs north-south through the county connecting Frederick with the Capitol Beltway, as soul-crushing, and said that while transit was desirable, it was not practical in suburban conditions where 70% of commuting happened by car. Meanwhile, Maryland Motor Vehicles Administration is issuing HOV permits to electric vehicles. Governor Moore has been seen at the wheel of now 2 electric trucks. Based on these indications, my expectation is that we will see the 495-270 toll lanes widening project move forward, which potentially pits the Moore-Miller administration against the bluest of blue, southern Montgomery County. The project still has several pain points on the way. First, financing. The project's private partner, when former Governor Hogan had envisioned it, a company from Australia called Transurban that built and runs the toll lanes in Virginia, withdrew from the project after Moore and Miller were elected, which means that the new administration has the opportunity to be able to restructure the financing from the old public-private partnership to a fully public effort. But for that, the state will have to raise money on its own, and the legislature will have to authorize it. And this comes up against state debt limits at a time when revenue projections for upcoming years are being revised downward. Second, canceling the old project altogether and starting anew means that the state will have to go through a new environmental analysis that may take several years, and possibly lose some federal support that has been promised. Third, the 495-270 project is tied to the question of what to do with the American Legion Bridge, the only crossing over the Potomac River between Maryland and Virginia in suburban Washington, D.C. While there appears to be political consensus that the bridge needs to be replaced, some anti-widening activists point out that the bridge only needs to be refurbished rather than replaced. Fourth, there is a question of adding transit capacity to the American Legion Bridge rather than adding roadway alone. Transurban, the company that withdrew from Maryland's 495-270 project, it appears has a non-compete clause with public transit and rail on the Virginia side. So any transit from Maryland will have to stop at the end of the new bridge. This presents a dilemma and possibly an opportunity. Will Transurban negotiate a return to the Maryland project in return for allowing public transit capacity on the Virginia side? Public funding of the project would obviate Transurban's role, but also mitigates the likelihood of building transit capacity over the American Legion Bridge. Virginia and Maryland added transit capacity on the Wilson Bridge on the eastern section of I-495. Fifth, while there is expert consensus that congestion pricing or toll lanes are a necessary traffic management tool, the politics of tolling existing highways rests on building new lanes where tolls can be charged, not just charging fees for existing roadway which has already been paid for. On the Capital Beltway on the Virginia side, the express or toll lanes were additional capacity. But Virginia also tolls I-66 now without having expanded that highway. Morning tolls on I-66 between 495 and Washington, D.C. can easily be as high as $25 a trip. The political fallout from I-66 tolling has died down in Virginia, in part because the governorship in the Commonwealth changes hands every 4 years. But in Maryland, solidly Democratic politics means that the outcry may be more significant. In southern Montgomery County, along sections of I-270 and I-495, where tolling can help congestion, there is considerable opposition against expanding the roadway itself. Lastly, the project as it stands is also subject to a lawsuit by the state's environmental advocacy groups, which has to be settled before the administration moves forward. All of this suggests that the Democratic administration of Moore and Miller will face off against strongly Democratic supporters on the 495-270 widening. The Moore Miller administration can also point to its strong support for Baltimore Red Line and the revival of the Purple Line light rail in Montgomery County as evidence of their commitment to transit and as a way to balance the highway expansion decision. As we end school year 2023 and start the summer planning for school year 2024, one of the critical problems facing schools, quite aside from structural issues such as equity, is student absenteeism, which many teachers believe is harming learning. Josh Stark, the former MCPS superintendent, in an interview on the podcast, said that the claim by school districts that virtual learning was just as good as in-person learning may have led some students to believe that attending class was unnecessary because the materials were available to students online and on their own time. The consequences of COVID on education are still rippling, but now an MCPS staff climate survey reveals that it may be time now to reverse the COVID-era accommodations that have had a perverse incentive on learning and teaching. Interestingly, these policy changes had been made way prior to COVID, but their impact seems to have worsened during the pandemic. The survey, conducted in collaboration with the county's teachers' unions, Council for Teaching and Learning, found that 70% of teachers said that the current attendance policy has a negative impact on learning. Recently, the student newspaper of Montgomery Blair High School, Silver Chips, reported that chronic absenteeism in county public schools, defined as 10% or more of a class missing, has doubled after the pandemic. MCPS used to have a loss of credit policy, which said that if a student missed a certain number of classes in a course, they would not receive credit in that course. This policy was changed about a decade ago and was intended to accommodate extraordinary circumstances, such as a student having to work to support their family. But it seems the pandemic's officially lax attitude toward missing classes finally brought the problem to a head. 77% of high school teachers also believe that the 50% rule is detrimental to learning. Less than 8% believe that it is necessary for students to succeed. The 50% rule refers to MCPS's practice of giving students 50% score in an assignment even when they have not seriously attempted it. Although the official MCPS rule states that a student can be given a score of 0 on an assignment if they do not attempt it, in practice, writing in their name or scribbling a few notes is counted as an attempt. Further, the demand for flexibility during COVID meant that students were guaranteed a 50% score for every assignment, no matter what. This made it easier for students to pass the course if they finally decided to turn in schoolwork. But learning has suffered. 622 high school teachers completed the survey. I'll be back with Baltimore energy activist Laurel Peltier.
Nada se termina. Tú te fuiste, yo partí. Dejas tu vino sin tomarlo. Seguí bebiéndolo por ti. Son misterios del amor cuando uno se separa sin saber dónde llegar. El día más oscuro, el día más
Laurel Peltier, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thank you.
In Maryland, we have a deregulated electricity utility market, um, and there are retail suppliers Maryland residents can buy electricity from. Can you please explain what retail suppliers are?
Yes. So think back to the 80s and 90s, the Reagan years, deregulation, many industries deregulated. It's a belief that many people in America have that you're going to have a better consumer outcome. And eventually energy deregulated. And our state, along with about 13 states in the country, mostly in the Northeast and Texas, we deregulated our energy markets.
When did that happen?
That happened in a law that was passed in 1999 called the Electric Choice Act, where consumers and businesses, if they want, they don't have to, but they can make the choice to pick an alternative retail energy supplier. Let me give you some names that you might recognize. Constellation is the largest one in the state. Constellation, a lot of people think is BG&E, but it is not. It's a independent regular energy supplier. NRG is another large one out of Texas. And then there's a whole bunch of little ones. WGL is, which also is part of Washington Gas. That's a deregulated energy supplier. And these companies compete for your business.
Laurel, these companies, these retail suppliers, they don't produce, they don't transmit. What are they supplying?
So they are just simply traders and middlemen. They have a very different, unique pricing model. Because the Electric Choice Act of 1999, I would argue, made a huge, huge error. They said, well, since it's competitive, there's no pricing oversight. The market, the free market, is going to oversee the rates.
When you say competitive, how are they competitive? What are they competing over? I don't even understand that.
There's no competitive edge for buying power in really large blocks. I mean, I would argue you just hit the nail on the head. There's no there. It took advantage of a law to go out and basically overcharge people hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And there's really no there.
In both the law and in the industry, there's a claim to competitiveness. I find it hard to imagine how that competitiveness is achieved when you don't produce it more cheaply, you don't distribute it. So where is the arbitrage?
For the people in Maryland who are on a retail supplier who do not check their bill, which is probably 92%, they're making money by charging whatever they want. And that family is just paying a lot more for electricity so that the retail supplier makes money and makes profit.
Is the central claim about overcharging then a matter of consumer ignorance?
So part of it is just an inattentive consumer audience, just a lack of understanding of what's going on. And I argue there is a predatory nature that they realized who's buying, and they go real hard after low-income communities of color and immigrants.
The exploitation of the model is a problem, I agree. But even the model itself, the fundamental, the feature, right, is incorrect. So I don't understand.
Right, especially because SOS, the way our state...
Explain. SOS is the standard offer service, right?
And it's a really interesting story, which nobody knows. It's actually it's a brilliant consumer protection tool. So when the Electric Choice Act came around to sweeten the pot, consumers in Maryland had price freezes for 5 years. 2005 comes around, Governor Ehrlich is the governor, and these price freezes expire. And guess what? The energy market is way higher, like at 75%. Our state sat back, our regulator, and said, we need to come up with a strategy so that consumers don't live and die by spot wholesale markets. And our state actually has a very unique system called standard offer service of buying wholesale power that's good for customers, where it buys it in, they call them tranches. Just think of them as buckets, short term, medium term, and long term, so that the prices are more even.
Right. Stabilized. Yeah.
If you look at our rate in Maryland, we only paid 10 cents this winter for electricity. Yes, it was 30% higher. It went from 7 cents a kilowatt hour to 10 cents. Call up your friends in New York City. They went from like 12 cents to 25 cents because they don't have this laddered way of having the different price buckets kind of be evened out. Not only is that a great way to price for consumers, there's no profit built into SOS for our regulators. Excuse me, our regulated utilities. They don't make money on selling energy. Their profit comes from distribution rates. Even if a retail supplier wanted to compete, they really can't.
Who thought this up?
All these things, it's interesting. They all happened independently. So the Electric Choice Act opened the market. The price freezes then opened up SOS for our regulators to be smart. I mean, at this point, there's very, very few retail supply contracts out there in 2005. As a matter of fact, only like 3% of the market was tasting into this. And then the market really wasn't even working into 2009.
So what happened in 2009?
Our Public Service Commission in 2009 made the choice to grow the competitive retail energy market. There was a regulation. You want to get into purchase of receivables.
What is purchase of receivable?
They made the argument that a supplier is going to send a billing feed. It's going to be printed on the BG&E bill. And 5 days later, that supplier is going to be paid whatever they charged their customer. Now think about that. Whatever they charged their customer, they're going to get paid. Minus a little teeny discount fee called purchase of receivable discount fee. And BG&E, I'm going to use them as an example. They're the largest regulated utility. 65% of retail accounts are on BG&E. They're going to buy up that receivable, and now they're in charge of billing, collecting, sending out termination notices, disconnecting, reconnecting, everything. It's all on BG&E. After purchase of receivables and utility consolidated billing starting in 2010, you can just see the number of suppliers they flooded Maryland. Everybody was getting, this is so cool. We're going to switch our energy supplier. And it bumped up from pretty much nothing to 550,000. About a quarter of our state sampled it. And then the polar vortex hit and it froze. And the wholesale market went nuts. They passed on those high wholesale rates to people. And all of a sudden people went, how did I go from the 7 cents this dude was selling me at my door to 45 cents? Well, that's the first time people tasted the risk associated with a variable rate. People don't even know they're on variable rates. They're baked into these horrible contracts. They might get a good rate for 2 months, and it's automatically written in your contract with wink, wink, no emails, no letters. You're going on a variable rate, girl. Just look at your 5 bills. It goes from 7 cents to 8 cents to 9 cents to 10 cents. Right now, they're running 26 cents, 29 cents when BG&E's 10 cents. I just looked at 4 bills where the person paid $3 a therm of gas when it was 65, 70 cents. Now, they're not going to pay their bill, but guess who does get paid? That supplier got paid. Their bill got cut, and that supplier walked off with an extra $200, $100, $150. So the numbers have dropped from 500,000, 550,000. So now we're at 340,000 customers. And these are the customers getting hit really hard right now. So this is all we say.
So this 340,000 households, right? Are they not able to get out of their contracts? They just don't care?
The classic retail supplier contract, which no one's looked at, is 5 to 6 pages. It's written by a Fortune 500 lawyer. It's ironclad. It is a bait and switch contract. It starts with a term limit of rates, a teaser rate, or a 1-year fixed rate. Mm-hmm. If you don't respond to the letter that they're going to send you 45 days out, telling you what they're offering you as their rates, if you don't respond to that, which Pennsylvania utility reporting shows us that 75% do not respond to that letter,
Okay.
the contract will automatically revert to month variable rates.
Are consumers tied in?
There are two kinds of contracts. There's a fixed rate contract. That's generally for 1 year, sometimes 2 years. And buried in a fixed rate contract, there aren't as many fixed rate contracts in the state, is a early termination fee. It's usually around $150.
Okay.
If you're on a variable rate contract, you call the supplier directly. Most people think you call into the utility. The utility has nothing to do with it. You call into the supplier directly. The 800 number is printed in little teeny font right on the front page, and you cancel your contract. If it's variable, you will have no termination fee, and your electricity is switched back in 3 days.
Okay.
That was a PSC did a regulation about that. Your gas, unfortunately, only switches on the first of the month for BG&E.
Is there a standard offer service in the gas market that Washington Gas must follow? That's completely deregulated, right?
Regulated gas is done on a month-to-month basis by all the utilities. And from what I understand, they do their very best to buy in large volumes and to buy the best price that they can. Again, there is no profit built into regulated gas. Gas is just a disaster in the state. Retail energy gas is a disaster because there's no federal reporting. So people like me can't go out there and tell everybody how much they're overpaying. All I can do is collect thousands and thousands of bills and create an average.
WGL, which is a deregulated retail supply company, is nevertheless associated with Washington Gas, right?
Yeah.
So, in fact, they are selling at two price points.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you nailed
So
it.
they created a separate company,
Uh-huh.
and they are passing that through where they can charge what they want versus selling it directly from Washington Gas. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. A bit of a conflict, don't you think?
Is there any kind of wall between Washington Gas and WGL that
Yes.
prevents that kind of coordination?
Is there a formal law? I'm not sure. They run independently.
How are they independent if their stockholders are the same?
I think that would be an interesting question to ask them.
The Constellation Exelon relationship is also similar to Washington Gas and WGL, right? How are you operating as a retail supplier and an SOS supplier in the same market? That seems not very competitive.
Constellation charged their they used to have about 150,000 customers. They now have about 95. Until this spinoff in February of 2022, they essentially on average charged their BG&E and Pepco Constellation customers the same rate. They spun off in 2022. And I said to myself, I'm so curious if they're going to maintain this parity. Now, this winter, I started all of a sudden getting Constellation bills where people who had never checked their bill before were like, why am I paying Constellation 11 cents instead of 10 or 13 cents or 16?
I have a second line of questions. Right. So the first line of questions was, how does this make competitive sense? And clearly, it's unclear how it does at best. You know, the second argument for having retail suppliers is that you encourage green energy. Some people are willing to pay a higher price for the power they buy with the confidence that the extra money that they are paying is going towards renewable energy sources. Is this true?
Mostly no. There is a unique concept that started in the end of the 90s. and it was based on acid rain. It was monetizing the environmental benefits of electricity. And they were doing that through what's called a renewable energy certificate. A renewable energy certificate, its goal was to create a tradable market based on the attribute of environmental benefits. Renewable energy certificates are stick with me here. So in your mind, picture a wind turbine in Texas. This is where they started, in Texas. And for every 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy that is created or generated by that wind farm, that is also called a megawatt hour, 1,000 kilowatt hours, 1 megawatt hour, one renewable energy certificate is created. It is basically an electronic virtual certificate that this energy was made. The green power retail energy offers that people are buying are based mostly on these renewable energy certificates, mostly from Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas.
And so Maryland has a market for X?
They have a compliance market. Our utilities are forced to buy renewable energy certificates off the PJM grid. This is a very tricky topic. What I can tell you is that for the retail energy marketers that go out there and tell you that you're getting green electricity, that is 100% not true.
So the retail suppliers who are selling green energy are basically buying RECs. Is that what they're doing?
Yes. The voluntary market, unbundled RECs, no standards, the cheapest they can possibly buy. As one legislator said in our hearing, could they be buying a REC from a Washington state hydro dam that cost 15 cents? And the answer is yes.
You know, in principle, there's nothing wrong with that. The consumer is not thinking that this is, hydropower in Washington state. That is deceptive. But if you are creating a market, the hydropower from Washington has the same value as offshore wind in Maryland.
Certainly not helping our air. It's certainly not creating any new generation. If you're allowed to do that, as retail suppliers are allowed to do today, that's exactly what they're doing. They are using all the business advantages that were given to them to sell green electricity to a household in Maryland. There's 100,000 households that have paid on average $415 more a year, thinking that they're getting wind energy generated in Pennsylvania, dumped into the grid, which is offsetting dirty energy. And that is not what's happening.
Okay, there is no offset of dirty energy. Do the purchase of RECs by retail suppliers count toward?
No.
Okay, so utilities can't do that. Pepco can't say, I'm transmitting their power and they have bought so many RECs, so I'll count them as well. That's not happening.
No. Each electricity company has to buy legally their compliance RECs based on our current state RPS.
What is RPS?
Renewable Portfolio Standard. Sorry. That's the commitment that our state has made to how much renewable energy is being purchased. And that renewable energy is being purchased through renewable energy certificates, and compliance ones that meet our renewable portfolio standard do have a lot more standards. There's still a lot of contention. I would argue what our state needs. Our state needs to audit. Like you said, in theory, a REC in theory sounds promising. I submit, if you're going to spend that kind of money, you should confirm that what you think is happening is happening.
Basically, a lot of this is greenwashing.
I definitely in retail energy.
Okay. All right.
Under our renewable portfolio standard, it is an open question to me as how effective it's meeting our goals. I think part of the money is probably supporting new generation, because the whole idea of this is to have more clean energy to offset polluting energy. That's what our climate needs.
Right.
I'm curious how much has been invested and what has it generated? That's a pretty basic question.
Yeah. I think, consumers who are paying more should have the confidence that the amount they're spending more is actually going to what they say they are spending to.
Do you want to know how this plays out for most people? I should say a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
On Wednesdays from 10 to noon, I get to work at a community center right in the northern Baltimore City. Beautiful place called Gedco Cares. Gedco is a big nonprofit, does mostly senior housing. I am an energy counselor, and I sit at a desk, just like Lucy and her sign, 5 cents. Mm-hmm. We have people that help with rent. It's an amazing, and a big food pantry in the back. And people walk in and they say, I got a cutoff notice from BG&E. And they hand me their envelope. And I open it up. The whole team does. And the first thing we do is we look at the balance. It's usually around $1,500. And I say, you're on an energy supplier. Did you know that? And they're like, I said no at the door. And then I said, oh, we got a cutoff notice for 2 weeks. Ooh. And then we get to work. Now we're in the foxhole.
Okay. What do you do?
Now in these 2 hours, first question is, what's your income for your family and your house? Can I get you on energy assistance? That's state money. It's federal and state money and ratepayer money. Can we quickly get your account a 55-day hold so you don't have your power cut off? We get you off the supplier right away. I educate them. You got to check your bill every month. Lately, it's been around $1,000 extra.
Do you ask them to go back to standard offer service?
Absolutely.
Okay. So your first advice is get off the retail suppliers and go back to standard offer. You do it now. In 3 days, you'll be done. Can they do it with a balanced spending?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Never.
All right. So second, they need to, your first option is, let's see if we can pay off the balance depending on your income. And if you can get energy assistance, maybe we can deal with it that way. It's easier than, fighting the company. Is that correct?
Well, if a customer was slammed and really, you get to know this. If they look at me and they're like, I never signed anything. I have no idea how this happened. The next step, I still got their bill. We're staring at their bill. The next step is to file a formal complaint with the Public Service Commission complaining that this was an unauthorized slam. Mm-hmm. Excellent. That's going to take months. But that's a formal process that most people don't know.
How can you even prove that one way or the other?
Oh, it's pretty amazing. Half the time they don't have a contract signed. I'm working with a lady right now, Section 8. She's way behind. And the signature is not even close to her signature. Often they'll use a bogus email. Like I'll see things like, I heart something, it's not their email. But that's the problem. Okay. And then they get a refund. They would get a refund. That can take up to 6 months.
Okay, but will they get a refund for how long? For the entire period?
Time.
And what is that refund? Is it the difference between the price charged and standard offer, or is it the entire amount of money?
It's the difference between what BG&E would have charged you,
okay,
or Petco, and what the supplier charged you.
Do we have accounting of how much retail suppliers have returned in the last number of years?
I don't know. You would have to ask the Public Service Commission.
Is that data is not publicly available?
I don't think so. I think they may have it. You can call their media person. Now, very, very few people. We are in a maximum enforcement period right now. Our Public Service Commission finally threw up their hands. As Jason Stanek said, the outgoing PSC commissioner, I feel like we are emptying a cesspool with a teaspoon. They're just not listening to us. They're doing a lot of bad stuff out there. It's been very helpful. It's been helpful in the sense that it got the word out about these suppliers. It got people filing more complaints. They've had the most complaints they've ever had. What really happened is there was a rate shock because of the wholesale market in 2023. Okay. 2.7 million individual sales since 2010. That's mostly at the door. 2.7 million. This whole state.
But there are only 2.3 million households in Maryland. So is it that the fact that the same people are turning over and going back to retail choice?
Yeah, especially the low income folks.
So they're going from one retail supplier to another retail supplier? Is that what's going on?
They're so broke. They when a retailer comes to the door with a $20 Family General card, and they're really broke, they're going to take there's an answer right there. There's food for a little bit.
Those folks would also be eligible for energy assistance.
Yes, many of them would be. And in 2021, Maryland did pass a law with Senator Washington and then Delegate Learman that energy assistance households as of July 1st of 2023 will not pay more than regulated rates. It's a small portion. It's maybe 30,000 of the 340,000 accounts.
What is the low income threshold?
For a household of one, it's $1,900 pre-tax in 1 month. It's going to be in July 1, it's 200%.
200% of federal poverty?
Okay. And just, we have 450,000 households in our state out of 2.3 million that fall in that category.
What are you looking for in terms of other policy fixes? What needs to be done?
There's two things. One is to revise purchase of receivables. We just, our coalition called Maryland Energy Advocates, we just petitioned the PSC. It's like a formal ask to review purchase of receivables.
How would you like it changed?
Just to eliminate it. You can't have Indra Energy out of New Jersey be able to charge $3.20 for gas and have it be totally legal.
And you're asking for a price cap?
The price cap would happen in Annapolis. That has to happen in Annapolis. That the Electric Choice Act is revised.
All right. So you're re-regulating the deregulated market, essentially.
Yes.
How do you fancy your chances?
Well, we understand the Public Service Commission is extremely busy with 6 rate cases. We are very patient and very open, very collaborative. We've talked to everybody about the purchase of receivables request. So maybe that will be looked at in the fall. And as far as the General Assembly, I think, as I say consistently every single time I meet somebody, someday somebody is going to step up and do the right thing. And I hope it's sooner than later.
Someday someone will step up and do the right thing implies that those who are there are not doing the right thing.
Energy politics is really tough. And we are up against really, really big, well-capitalized companies. NRG and Vistra each have over 20, 25 billion in sales. And Constellation, I think, is around 28 billion. We are out-lobbied, but it is time to fix retail choice. This is just unnecessary.
You're out-lobbied, but Maryland is now a super majority Democratic state. And in the Assembly, it has been a super majority Democratic state for a long time. Are you saying that the Democratic Party and the Democratic legislators are not supportive of this kind of thing?
No, I think we had to get a Democratic governor. Hogan was supportive of retail choice. He was if you go and look in 2005, he got a big check from NRG and from Exelon. And I heard from many people in his various agencies that our state supports competitive retail supply. If you want stuff fixed, you have to be persistent and patient.
Laurel Peltier, good luck.
Thank you.
Porque me has querido con ardor. No sé cómo decirte, ya no estoy. Tal vez es un deseo de traición.
You're listening to I Hate Politics. I am Sunil Dasgupta. What lessons should we draw from my conversation with Baltimore-based energy activist Laurel Peltier? First, utility law, and especially managing the combination of a natural monopoly with the logic of the market, is not just complex, but perhaps impossible. The famed Hungarian economist János Kornai used to say of the command economies of the former Soviet bloc that they broke down from inherent and internal inconsistencies. We can say the same thing about the utility market, where tax credits and ephemeral trading markets have come to rule to the detriment of narrow economic public welfare and also climate action. Second, as a matter of research, I am fascinated by the 340,000 households in Maryland who remain in the retail choice market. There is little economic logic, and given that trading firms are merely greenwashing using renewable energy certificates, there appears to be false advertising as well. Zhenya Conlang, a newly minted economist from the University of California, Berkeley, has concluded that the deceptive marketing practices is more the norm than the exception, with significant costs to low-income minority and immigrant households. Third, there is legislative movement. The new law that is going to protect low-income folks by not allowing retail suppliers to charge those consumers more than the standard offer service rates means likely that retail choice suppliers are going to exit that market. Montgomery County Delegate Lorik Cherkudian has a new law that now enables the Montgomery County government to act on behalf of residents to buy electricity at low prices. The Public Service Commission is working out the rules, but if it works in Montgomery, she plans to take the legislation statewide. Lastly, there is one issue in the broken utility market, yet again the consequence of the 1999 deregulation, that I did not talk with Laurel Peltier about. And that is asset loading by utility companies whose only pathway to a higher rate of return on investment is to add more infrastructure to their balance sheets. Once a piece of equipment or pipeline is deemed necessary for service, the new electricity and gas rates have to be adjusted to give the company a rate of return. This is a particular problem for Washington Gas, whose fossil fuel infrastructure has to be wound down to meet climate goals, but which is now making large new investments from which they will continue to make profit in the future. Watch out for that episode. That's all for this episode. You've been listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from Arlington-based roots and Argentinian-tinged world music singer-songwriter Valeria Stewart and her trio Crooked Sparrow. Kevin Dudley on guitar and mandolin, Valeria Stewart on vocals and guitar, and Jenny Smith on the violin. You can find Valeria's music in Spanish and English on her YouTube channel at Valeria Stewart Music. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.
I come to you now, yellow flowers in my hand. find truth revealed by love and time, unspoken forgiveness. We do what we can. I come to you now, yellow flowers in my hand. Unspoken forgiveness. We do what we can. I come to you now, yellow